late into the night, falling finally towards dawn as US forces entered the city to minimal resistance. For several hours, though, the streets echoed to the sound of sniper rifles and the returning fire from the Americans. This town was the boost they needed, a vital staging post from which a corridor can be opened between the two US bridgeheads. To the population, though, liberation has meant destruction. There isn't much left to salvage. We're now seeing the start of the second phase of the beachhead operations, a more concerted drive aimed at cutting off the Cherbourg Peninsula. All day yesterday, fighting intensified around Saint-Mère-Église. It was the first town liberated on D-Day, but has remained since then in contention. Men of the 82nd Airborne Division have held it against repeated German counterattack from the south. Today, though, the enemy units were finally beaten back, and the town belonged to America. Artillery battles had raged through the night, causing substantial damage. By morning, it was clear German casualties had been heavy. For strategic and psychological reasons, this was a town the Americans had to hold as the heavy fighting continues across northern France. Further east, British and Canadian forces are making some progress south of Bayeux, but have yet to penetrate defenses around the strategically important town of Caen. Here, the tank battles continued unabated, with the Allies facing some of the strongest panzer units in France. To combat them, Monty's two crack desert divisions are moving into the battlefront. But even so, the prospect of Caen falling soon is bleak.
The English PO
continues. The number of German prisoners is steadily increasing. Their faces reflect the horror of battle and the indignity of capture. Thousands are marched to the beachheads. They reflect the mixed quality of the enemy forces, from proud, unrepentant officers to dejected young conscripts. Many of them slave troops taken from Russia, Poland, even Mongolia. The evacuation plans encompass not only our own wounded, but injured POWs too. They've been gathered on Normandy's beaches, awaiting transport to Britain. There's plenty of room aboard the hundreds of vessels pressed into service for the invasion. Their captains only too eager to have such a cargo for the return trip. The swelling tide of prisoners is causing logjams in the coastal towns which receive them. Officers are segregated from other ranks, and trains take the prisoners to 4 locations in northern England or 2 in Scotland. Those who might well have valuable inside information on German military plans and deployment are sent to what's known as the London Cage. Under the Geneva Convention, interrogation is forbidden, but government sources indicate they have evidence Hitler is flouting the rules of war in his treatment of Allied prisoners. A makeshift internment camp has been set up here at Kempton Park. It's filling up fast with bewildered young Germans who know it's all over, not only for them, but perhaps for their country too.
As these pictures show, Rommel's plan to push the Allies back into the sea has failed. But at this stage, the meeting of British and American troops is symbolic rather than strategic. The bitterest fighting is away from the beachheads, and there is much more to come. These tanks, virtually trapped in lanes hemmed in by 12-foot banks and 3-foot hedges, indicate that the battle is not going as planned. In this terrain, German ambushes are easy to mount and effective. A lead tank knocked out holds up the whole column. Even in the best cases, the line of sight is limited to 400 yards. Mortar attack is particularly devastating. And because of the close fighting in this so-called Bocage territory, casualties are high. Ammunition, in particular grenades, are being used at an unexpectedly fast rate. Consequently, the advance has so far not matched the original forecast. Although some columns of German armour have been knocked out by Allied planes, the newly arrived elite Panzer-Lehr division is providing formidable opposition. They are now defending the small towns around Tilly-sur-Seine, southwest of Caen. The British 50th Division is trying to penetrate the Panzer-Lehr. All morning long-range bombardment by Royal Navy battleships and cruisers has helped the 50th Division to take some of the small villages around Tilly, although Tilly itself remains in German hands. General Montgomery's plan was to secure the beachheads, force the Germans into a tactical withdrawal, and then break out on both flanks. The Germans are not performing to Monty's script. As we approach the end of the first week of this invasion, there is a sense that the Allied commanders may have chosen Normandy for its favourable landing sites, not for its battlefields.
Allied planes are now operating from airfields inside France, and fighters and fighter bombers have been out again attacking the German supply lines. In the last 5 days, more than 30,000 sorties have been flown.
Since the initial landings, a high Allied priority has been to create makeshift airstrips that would greatly extend the range of the fighter bombers. As of today, the RAF is again operational from French soil. So are Mustangs from the 9th US Air Force. Ground crews were arming Typhoons of the RAF's flying artillery for rocket strafing, in which they've been excelling all week. Together with the Americans, they've flown tens of thousands of sorties, blasting rail yards, wrecking trains, and crippling rail links the Germans are desperately trying to use to bring up panzer reinforcements from the south and the east. Only hours ago, Typhoons of 83 Group attacked the headquarters of German Panzer Group West, reportedly killing several senior officers. And all week, the so-called cab-rank rocket brigade have turned much of northern France into a shooting alley, blitzing German airfields, road convoys, bridges, fuel dumps, tank columns, and even here, a command staff car. But the Luftwaffe has at last been putting in an appearance. It seems that during the first days of the invasion, German fighters have been deployed to defend the fatherland against Allied air raids. Those Luftwaffe planes that took off today were soon pounced on by RAF interceptors and shot down. In all, the Luftwaffe has lost 200 planes this week. Allied air superiority over the battlefield has rarely been more supreme.